we always like to be clear that what we teach about money can be an and asset, an and benefit to anything else someone's doing. And the minute that you see them competing, you know somebody's trying to sell you something. And so what Nate said perfectly that I can touch on is my wife and I did Dave Ramsey and the Baby Steps Die Hard. And we paid off a whole lot of outside debt to university.
So in the book Money Unmasked, Garrett has an exercise that he walks through with people called the value index. And so if you're listening, we're going to walk through this exercise just briefly. In your mind or on a piece of paper, write down $10. Now, what would it feel like if you got $10 a month for the rest of your life without having to work for it? Write down $100. We're going to add a zero. You get $100 a month for the rest of your life. The next step is to write down $1,000 a month. You get $1,000 a month for the rest of your life without having to work for it. What would you do with that? Now write down $10,000.
Welcome to the Cashflow Legendz podcast with your hosts Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this.
Welcome back to Cashflow Legendz. You have Nate and I today. If you're not watching on YouTube and you're just listening on a podcast platform, our boy Brock, I don't even remember where Brock is, but he's been pretty busy between travel and summertime and events. And Brock is really always getting himself out there and having some great conversations, which always brings a ton of value back to our conversations when he gets in rooms with, people and mindsets and behaviors that support what we're doing and help us expand and grow. So, Nate, how are you today?
Smashing. I'm doing really well.
Okay, good.
The Lord's been good. Of course, some of the things that have been going on behind the scenes. But man, just very grateful to be able to do the things that we do, and very grateful for my awesome wife and kids.
Amen. That's good stuff. So if you are coming to this for the first time and you've never listened to Cashflow Legendz, you're probably like, what the heck are these guys talking about? We're always talking about how money flows through our life, and we're talking about financial clarity and keeping more of what you earn so you can earn more with what you keep. But in the grand scheme, if this is your first time to ever listen, I would say it's very non-traditional. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I mean that as a good thing and a compliment to where our journey, Nate, has started and where it is now on how we think about money and what money really is and the role it plays in our life. So I'm starting this as if this is the first one that anyone's ever listened to. We're always grateful when you share your time with us, because that is the most valuable resource you have that you and I do not control. We think we do, but Nate and I are reminded daily that we are allowed to participate in this awesome thing called life. It's a blessing from the Lord that is a privilege, and we want to be good stewards of it.
Brandon, we're talking about kids and money, and when you said traditional thinking, it reminded me, like, when we're kids, we're so quick to ask why and want to understand why something is. And somewhere along the way, as we get older, we stop asking why.
Yeah. And Nate, I think that's a really good connection point to the conversation today about kids and money. Why do we stop asking why is a really good place to start. Because when we're kids, we have very little awareness of how much something costs, the price of something, how it's going to impact anything. It's just a matter of, that seems cool, let's do it. And a lot of times things don't cost anything to enjoy life as a kid. Running around with your friends, playing outside in the creek, whatever life you grew up in. Nate, what you got going there? I see your face.
So I shared this story the other day, and it's totally relevant to right now. When we were in high school, I can't remember the guy's name, He was a couple years older than us. He had a custom full-size Chevy pickup, and it was like custom paint job. Like it had the wheels, it had the sound system, everything. And everybody thought that truck was just so cool, including me for sure, because I always admire good looking trucks. So, like I said, he was a few years older than us. Well, I remember running into him a few years later, like even like after I graduated high school, and we were just kind of catching up a little bit. And I said, "You still got that truck?" And he goes, "Oh yeah." He said, "A couple more years, I'll have it paid off." And all of a sudden, that truck was not appealing to me at all, because I realized that there was work that went into, making that happen for him, and a lot of sacrifice at the same time. And it ties back to this idea that a lot of times as kids, we don't understand the work and sacrifice that goes into creating value and creating money.
Yeah. So Nate, that's a really good point on, where do we lose our desire to ask why? Said another way, where do we start going from being the most creative things we can be to thinking it is the way it is and it's always going to be that way? And Nate, this is why this is so important to talk about with what we want to teach our kids about money. So anybody out there listening that has a kid or a grandkid or kids and grandkids, the first thing that Nate and I would say is, what is your definition of money, and what is the value of money in your life, and what do you want it to do in your family? Because Nate and I can say confidently now that we don't want our children to be taught finances if it's going to be from the traditional viewpoint that almost all of the world operates on. I don't want them doing that in school.
Well, in the traditional thinking, traditional thought process often does not factor in mindset and purpose into the equation. It's almost like we're just these little worker bees that are pumping out money and socking it away into some account that's supposed to be there for us one day, because that's what everybody tells us we're supposed to do. Yep. And we kind of have this drone process, behavior, mentality, whatever you want to think, whatever you want to call it, where nobody, rarely, sits down and talks to kids about purpose and how money can fuel your purpose.
Yeah, it's let's go back to the vehicle point of view and run an analogy from that way. If you see all these vehicles on a car lot and you're like, I want that one, and I know for sure I want that one because I know why I want it, what it's going to do, the purpose it's going to serve, all those things. Well, then you're going to figure out what kind of fuel it needs to make that one go, but you're also going to have to figure out how to get your dollars to accomplish the purchase of that. Okay. So the first thing is how do we teach our kids about money? What if I told everyone listening here, and Nate, I try to put myself in the shoes of listening to this 10 years ago, which is a kind of a weird thing to do, but it makes a ton of sense. How would I have received this? So if I were listening and I heard someone else say, what if I told you one of the simplest things that you can do to teach your kids about money is start to change how you talk about money? And Nate, you and I have had this conversation a lot lately. How we think leads to what we do next. If what we've been doing is what we've always been doing, then it's going to solidify how we've been thinking. And that's good if we like the results that we're getting. If we don't, that is insanity. The definition of it, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And Nate, you and I are guilty of this. So Nate and I promised before we hit record that we would be very clear. We have nothing fully figured out. One of the things that we figured out for sure is that staying in the state of I know there's always something new to learn, and I can never figure everything out. And there's always somebody that can teach me a new idea, a new thought, a new way to see things, is the place to stay and lean into, and never do what Nelson said in Becoming Your Own Banker, which is to have arrived. Because it is a very dangerous thing to suffer from the arrival syndrome.
Well, a counter culture message that we believe in and hold to is that we were not created to get, we were created to give. And so another great place to start with your kids is talking about the value of stewardship and what that means.
Yeah.
It means that when we receive something, our first thought is not necessarily what can I buy with this, but how can I create value for someone else around me?
Yeah. That's good, Nate. And you just helped me unlock a little, I've had a brain lock in my brain for all these years that we've been teaching infinite banking and Becoming Your Own Banker. And because it, in many ways, collides with what I'd been taught before we began to learn and understand and implement and share and teach and coach on this. When I hear the word financial education or financial literacy, I cringe internally, because I don't think that we can have a podcast episode about how to teach your kids about money and use the same terms that everybody uses, but try to get people to think differently. So like for me, it's intentional, it's purposeful awareness of what our money does to fuel good stewardship, good behavior related to money, how we honor the Lord with the dollars that flow through our life, which is a daily process of being aware that it's all His anyways. So Nate, tell me what you're thinking on that and how that resonates with you.
Well, it brings me back to something that you know that I just shared with you yesterday, that I have had I've been given the unique opportunity and privilege to teach a 1-week financial education class in the spring at a private school that my kids go to. So I'm going to be teaching for a week. I'm going to be teaching 20 to 25, a different lesson every day for 5 days, 20 to 25 students about financial education. But the title of the class, whenever I submit it for people to decide if they want to sign up for it, is going to be called Not Your Parents' Financial Education. And it is going to be radically different than all the things they've been exposed to up to this point, because they do the Dave Ramsey, financial peace classes and stuff like that at the school, like a lot of other schools do. So the things that they're going to hear from me are going to be they're going to complement some of the things they've already learned, but they're also going to be counter to some of the things that they've already learned. Not to create confusion or argument or anything like that, but just to help them understand that a lot of the things that they have learned is from the traditional mindset, the traditional way of thinking.
Yeah. And Nate, for anybody listening that has not known us very long, or we haven't visited in person, or you're coming to this for the first time, we always like to be clear that what we teach about money can be an asset and benefit to anything else someone's doing. They don't compete. And the minute that you see them competing, somebody's trying to sell you something. And so what Nate said perfectly that I can touch on is, my wife and I did Dave Ramsey and the baby steps die hard. And we paid off a whole lot of outside debt to university. And what we know now is we could have taken that same discipline and plugged it into this mindset we have now. And we could have kept more of our dollars under our control. We could have passed more of our dollars on to the next generation tax-free. And we could create a more cushion and peace of mind while paying off that debt. And that's an important piece of anything that we're doing when teaching our kids. Are we really opening up to the idea that being a producer and a good steward of the abilities to be a producer and a creator in this world is more important to talk and teach to our kids and create things around than being a consumer. Because the world cannot wait to teach our kids how to be a consumer. So let's go a practical example, Nate. We've got teenagers. Nate's got 4 kiddos, 21 down to, what's the youngest? 12. And I've got 4, 15 down to 9. If any of my kiddos come to me and say, hey, Dad, I want this. And this is something I struggle with, Nate, okay? Because we haven't got anything figured out. But if they say, I want this, the conversation, depending on the age, could go more something like this. Okay, that thing costs this. What value is it going to bring in your life? And it could be anything from a new pair of shoes to start the school year to a training bat for my oldest son who wants to, play collegiately in baseball, anything in between. So what value is that going to bring, and what value can you create in this house and our family, across our family dynamic, that will allow you to purchase that thing? Because the value created connects to whose they are and how God created them to glorify him in this world. And those things, whether we like it or not, you cannot take money out of our daily interactions. It's impossible. So we have to first come to grips with this reality that money is a part of all of our lives. Really, the behavior and the relationship we have with it is what we're passing on to our children by teaching, asking, developing questions to help them think about it, or by not doing any of those things, we're still teaching them, Nate.
Yeah.
This is something we love to do often. If you don't think what you believe about money is rooted in your early childhood years, when you're visiting with us, we may say some things like, money doesn't grow on trees. Takes money to
make money.
And the list goes on and on. And if we went through 20 of those, people can almost always fill those in, Nate. Why is that?
Indoctrination.
That's it's
the way we've heard it. It's
there you go.
It's more repetition than indoctrination.
There you go.
It's like you hear it over and over and over again, and it starts to feel like truth.
Yes.
Yes. Obviously, parents are going to be listening to this, and one of the things that I would just encourage you in is, like, I have known some incredible parents who had some really stubborn kids who didn't always follow their advice or listen to everything they said. So give yourself some grace as a parent, and also give your kids a little bit of grace, because sometimes kids have to learn the hard way. Sometimes they'll take wisdom and they'll run with it, and sometimes they'll run away from the wisdom. So give yourself some grace, and just know that I think the Lord honors the sincerity that you have in your heart.
Yeah, that's good, Nate. When we think about children, and if we believe, Nate, like you and I, that they are God's kind of on loan to us to hopefully strengthen them, in their walk with the Lord, struggle's necessary. So we really like a book called Value Creation Kid. And it takes this very simple thought process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And so think about your children as the caterpillar, as they're a baby and they're growing. And eventually, whether we like it or not, they're probably going to fly away. Well, while they're in the cocoon, changing from the caterpillar to the butterfly, they make the great point that struggle is necessary for the transformation, because it strengthens the wings of the butterfly. And so if there's no struggle, if there's no friction while they're in our home, then their wings are not going to be strong enough to be able to handle, adjust, dodge things going on when they leave our home. So the struggle is going to happen someplace. The real question is, how are they prepared for it, and how do we help with that?
Yeah. Well, your wife having the nursing background that she does, she could probably relate to this at a different level because the the traditional birthing process, part of that process involves the strengthening of the lungs for the baby. So when kids are delivered through C-section, they have a process that they have to go through outside the womb to develop their lungs properly.
Yep. That's a great point, Nate. And it reminds me of that saying. I don't know who we heard it from, and it's probably somebody that copied it from somebody else, that probably came from scripture, if we really find the root of it. Basically, if it's easy now, it's hard later. If we make everything easy for our children, and this is hard to do, especially if generationally how we were raised or the one before had a lot or had nothing, we don't want our kids to struggle. But in reality, and Nate, I'm going to use your oldest. Your oldest is getting into sales right now in the sense of communicating with people, interacting, putting himself out there, doing things that I don't know, maybe he never thought he would do even 2 years ago.
Oh, we
Okay.
never thought he like it's like he has gone through a metamorphosis in the last
100%.
really in the last year. Um,
So the cool thing about that is I get to hear it from the outside and connect it to what all Nate and I have learned in our journey as business owners. And it's opened up Nate and his conversations at a different level because he recognizes we're in some ways in similar worlds. And so I didn't even tell Nate this, but I texted him the other day when he was just short of a goal. And everything inside of Nate and I wanted to help him reach that goal. Nate and I haven't talked about this. He was just short. And I texted him, I said, "Hey, did you make it?" And he goes, "No, I just missed it." And I said, "Good," with an exclamation. And he knew what that meant. He knew that it wasn't that he did or didn't make it. It was that he put in the effort and the energy and the accountability and the time and the devotion to create, to not be a consumer. And to make no doubt about it, anybody listening, if your children know the Lord as their Lord and Savior, they were created by the creator of the heavens and the earth. And helping them understand how to be creators in this world to glorify the Lord and the skills they've been given and the purpose that God gave them to love the Lord and love others, it really is that simple. We make it real hard, but it really is that simple. So all four of mine and all four of Nate's have different strengths that the Lord gave them, and they also have different weaknesses that reminds them that they need the Lord all day, every day, and that they may partner up with other people in business or in accountability or as iron sharpens iron, Proverbs 27:17, and go, oh, my weakness is not a weakness in the sense of traditional thinking. My weakness is that I need to depend and be vulnerable enough to know that the Lord's always working. This is in business. This is in marriage. This is in all things that we do. So the first thing I would challenge anybody listening about money, Nate, for our parents of soon to be kids, already have kids, going to have a lot more, is what is your belief system around money? Is it an emotional belief system? Or is it this is reality that money's a tool and we're going to build systems and habits around how that tool fuels the purpose that we've been created for his kingdom?
Hey, so let's go through. Since you said that, this idea just popped in my head.
Let's do it. I already know where you're going, I think.
So in the book Money Unmasked, Garrett has an exercise that he walks through with people called the value index. And so if you're listening, we're going to walk through this exercise just briefly. Now, I highly encourage you to go read the book Money Unmasked, where he kind of really, really breaks it down.
Mhm.
But in your mind or on a piece of paper, write down $10. Now, what would it feel like if you got $10 a month for the rest of your life without having to work for it, what would you do with it? You know, get an extra cup of coffee this
Yes.
month.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, something like that. Okay.
Yeah. I'll play with you. I'll be the role play on the other side.
Perfect.
Yep.
So now write down $100. We're going to add a zero. You get $100 a month for the rest of your life. What would you do with that?
First thing that came to my mind, Nate, is I would start funneling it to my children somehow.
Okay.
Probably through things we know. We don't have to go into the details.
The next step is to write down $1,000 a month. You get $1,000 a month for the rest of your life without having to work for it. What would you do with that?
Nate, I haven't done this exercise with you in a long time, so this is good. $1,000 a month matters to me the way I grew up. And so it would probably go into fortifying what wealth means to us through the things we've learned. And wealth means to us, and we're still working on this: wisdom, empathy, accountability, love, time, and health. And are those dollars fueling that? So without going into too much detail, it would go into our mindset of how we believe in money being a tool.
Now write down $10,000. $10,000 a month for the rest of your life without having to work for it. What would you do with it?
Nate, I would spend the majority of my time being sure my schedule mapped out me giving more than I took. And I can say that just because I've experienced the privilege it is, that how giving is not about the people we're helping give our time, energy, effort, talents to. It's really about the condition of our heart. $10,000 a month in my mind would change our life.
Now write down $100,000. $100,000 a month for the rest of your life without having to work for it. What would you do with it?
I would double down on giving it away in some way as efficiently as possible.
Now, we could go all the way to a million, a billion, but the point of that exercise is figuring out what your value index, what your number is, from where you switch your mindset to thinking about what I can buy, what I can do for myself, to what I can give. And so whenever your switch flips, now you know what your goal is.
Yeah.
Because that once we can get into that sort of mode, we're no longer living in scarcity. We are absolutely living in abundance in a really powerful way. And so when you figure out what your number is, that really becomes your goal now, because you quit worrying about yourself and you started worrying about other people.
Yep. And Nate, what I love about that, and this is very important, is if Nate would have walked me through that exercise 10 years ago, I would have been way more focused on what I wanted for way longer. But because you and I have had the privilege of seeing money more often than not lately as a tool, but it's all the Lord's, there's still a number, that 10,000 number, if I'm being completely transparent, if that could start coming in automatically, no questions asked, guaranteed, and I know the ability God's given us to create value in the world to this point, then we're off to the races if that's his will. And what I love about that exercise also, Nate, is you realize that most of our behaviors and actions and belief systems and reactions to money are emotional first. how we feel. So if I had this number of dollars coming in, it would make me feel this way, which would encourage me to do that. So that immediately debunks traditional financial thinking often, which is you can get this rate of return under these rules. And so simplifying it for children is being sure that our kids know there are only 4 things you can really do with money, whatever way money is when we're talking about it. Nate, we can save it, we can spend it, we can invest it, and we can give it away or get rid of it, however you want to think about that. So we've just simplified money. Here's the cool thing. We can teach our children those things, but we have to, as husbands and wives and families, continue to grow at our thinking of how we think about money. Because think about it this way. If our children, Nate, watch us only work trading time for money, and they see our actions proving that above other things we say are important, they're going to go by and believe what they see. Dad said family and time with the Lord and going and giving and ministry was important, but Dad worked at 90 hours a week and we never saw him. We have to be at this reality.
Reminded me of a conversation that I was having with my oldest son before he went to college several years ago, and I told him because he was talking about needing to get a job, and I said, "Don't go get a job." I said, "Figure out how to make some money." And he was like, he looked at me funny, and I said, if you're, and nothing wrong with people who clock in and clock out.
No.
My advice to him, I said, when you're in college, if you are subject to someone else's terms, it's much more difficult to navigate your schedule, navigate life. And also, it's difficult to come home on the weekends when you want to. And so, he figured out how to make some money without necessarily having a traditional job where he was clocking in and clocking out. Even when he had a job, he had a unique job that did not require him to clock in and clock out at a certain time. He just had a job that had to be done that week, and he got to navigate how he did it when he did it.
Yeah, Nate, here's a really, really good piece that we can think through for our children. If we help them strengthen and fortify whose they are and how they've been created for his kingdom and our belief and our strong belief, they're going to be skills they have that are going to be very clear. That's going to fit them. But no matter how you dice it, if I have a kid who wants to be a doctor and I have another kid who wants to be a missionary and I have another kid who wants to be a college coach and I have another kid who wants to live on a beach and be an entrepreneur. Understanding money and how it's a tool to fuel purpose. I like that. A tool to fuel purpose is more important than becoming a slave to money by trading time for money first. Because the system is designed to make those handcuffs tighter as we age. So I tell one of mine who may be a world traveler, I'm not saying do or don't do these things. I'm saying lean on the Lord. But what I am saying is the better that you understand what money really is, the more likely it is for you to have freedom of choice when seasons change. Maybe you love the job, but the pay's not enough. What if pay didn't matter? See, this is a complete re-engineering of how we've been taught. So I was having a conversation, Nate, and we'll tidy up on this because I think it's important for parents. Technology is moving so fast that it used to be, I heard this on a podcast the other day. I'm paraphrasing, fact check this. It used to be that you could not outpace a 5-year or 4-year degree. Like by the time you got done, it was still relevant. Now, AI and technology is making the things that you learned in school irrelevant in less than a year. So I was having a conversation with one of our members who's a dear friend of mine who I coached. And he said, what are your thoughts on me getting a degree? And I said, as compared to what? He had some options on the table. And I said, my humble opinion is right now, unless you're doing something that requires a degree and you know you're called to do that, doctor, lawyer, something like that. I
Basketball
said,
coach.
Basketball coach. Yeah, anything that requires that requirement. And that's not even depending on what state you're in, Nate. You may not have to have that in some states. Being nimble and flexible and in control to adjust is, to me, one of the greatest assets that you could have that has nothing to do with money right now. And if that becomes clear for this person in particular, whatever you make fuels that with the knowledge you have right now to create more flexibility, more ability to be nimble and adjustable. Because most people stay where they are, Nate, not because they don't feel like they should do something else. Is because they don't know how to get out of where they are.
Yeah. When I said basketball coach because my son has known from day one that he wanted to coach basketball. Both of my boys just love basketball. And so they both decided that they want to coach basketball. They just want to stay as close as they can to the sport. But I was going somewhere with this and thought just left me.
You're good. Well, it might be this, Nate. You're talking about how there's not, we're talking about the reality of coaching. I mean, I was a coach forever. Your wife's in education. There's not money in it. It's very rare that you're going to earn what you're worth in high school coaching. Period. Because if you love it and you're called to it, you're going to put in 60 to 85 hours a week.
I know where I was going with that. The statistic used to be, time back into getting a degree. The statistic used to be that 65% of people who had a degree were not working in the field that their degree was actually in. And so my advice now to people who are considering college is, if you don't absolutely know what you want to do, take a year and figure it out. Go do some stuff.
And go ahead, keep going.
There's the educators out there in the world today would be screaming right now because they're like, no, if they don't go to college right away, then the chances of them going to college later, drop drastically or whatever. But if I had a kid who did not know what they wanted to do right now, I would say you do not have to go from high school directly into college. Take a year, try some stuff, and see where your heart goes.
Yeah. Well, and add to that, Nate, it doesn't have to be just that moment. If we're leaning into as parents, we can do things to help our kids understand those things early on. At 9, 10, 11, we can go, hey, go work with this farmer that's a dear friend of ours. Go spend a day with him. Hey, go over here and work with this friend of ours who has a mowing business. Hey, go over here at 16 and get permission to ride in a police officer's car. Whatever the interests are, we have the ability as parents to expose them to things that get them clarity on what they're called to do on this earth to glorify the Lord and to love others. The money is just a byproduct of that. Because, Nate, you know this as well as I do, for teachers. And I can say this because I was one for 14 years and I was an educator and had my superintendent certificate and all that. Almost everybody who gets into education feels like they're called to do so. Where they get frustrated and want to beat their head against the wall typically is the system is constantly keeping them from having enough flow of money to stay where they are. They have to choose, and that creates misery or frustration or disappointment. As opposed to if we went through that exercise with the teacher and we said, hey, at what zero on that dollar amount do you feel like you could stay where you believe you're called to stay because you'd be receiving that forever and you'd actually be able to give more to your students? The best teachers I have been around often, not always, but often, don't need the money. That proves, Nate, that most people stay in jobs they love, and money's like the fifth, sixth thing that's of order of operation or importance. It's trust, it's support, it's purpose, it's being a part of something bigger than themselves. That's statistically proven. And so if we look at the statistics, Nate, 20% of students, last time I checked, that graduate high school, only 20% get a degree anyway. Roughly, check that, but it used to be that. So we're leaving 80% of the population out. So I talked to one of our members Monday, Nate, and he said, we are teaching our children that they don't need to go to college. That's a thing you do if there's a specific area you have to do it in. And it can be done in a much different way than going $150,000 in debt. In fact, we can create something that creates the ability to pay for that way to grow in that area without being handcuffed to the debt system. What a different way to think about it. Hey, you want to go get your degree? Can we teach you enough about money and providing and creating that that's going to be paid for by the efforts you put in before you get there? That's a whole different way of thinking. And it also helps us go, oh, is this really important? Or if it isn't, I may pull the plug quicker. And that's the conversations about money, Nate, that we hope everybody listening takes away, is that mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, we have to be striving to know that we've never arrived and there's always something new we can learn, and be transparent and vulnerable enough to go, hey, kids, this is how I used to think. Here's some things that we're thinking on now about how we live and the actions we take. And I can tell you, for Nate and I, trading time for money, no matter what profession it's in or what world, to lock away to do traditional financial education is not something we will ever teach our kids again in the traditional sense. Not because of anything other than we've lived both sides of that life. So the real question is, for parents listening, is how would you like to, or what would you like to be able to say about your kids' relationship with money when they get to be your age? And work backwards from there. If there's some things in that relationship with money that still haunt you, like Nate and I, where we have to overcome it all the time, then how can we do things differently in our household with the conversations we're having? Hey, if it makes you mad you can't buy this to help somebody, it's not bad that you don't have the money. It's a mindset thing. What do we need to do to create value in the world, to create the money that follows the value, to provide the thing for the person or the people or the thing that matters the most? It's just a reordering of how we think about how we think, which, Nate, for us in Nelson's message, one of his 5 key principles in becoming your own banker is rethink your thinking. And that scares the bejesus out of most people that don't have these conversations daily, because they're not used to having their thinking challenged to decide if they want to rethink their thinking. We suffer from arrival syndrome. It's as good as it's going to get. Can't teach me anything new. I've already got this figured out. It is what it is. That is hogwash. Unless you're happy with it is what it is. Now, we could go on and on about heritage and living in inheritance and what all that really means. But you got anything to tidy us up?
Not really, other than I just had this thought to tie back to something I said earlier. As a parent, give yourself grace, because
Good.
I was an absolute knucklehead when I was a kid, and did some stuff in high school I wasn't proud of at all. And if you saw me back then and saw me today, you'd be like, what in the world happened? And all I can say is Jesus happened.
Yep.
So
Yep.
pray for the salvation of your kids. Pray for the Holy Spirit to stir the hearts of your kids.
Yep. Amen. I love that. All right. If you like this, if you don't like the things we talk about, let us know. We're not scared of constructive criticism. Now, don't be so ugly that we have to delete your comment. Just go on and put on there, hey, would like y'all to touch on this, or what do you think about that? We realize that one of the greatest ways to grow that Nate and I found is through friction and the awareness that we have got nothing figured out. And there's always something new that we can learn and grow in and be challenged on. So like, subscribe, all those things that we need to help us move along. But we're just grateful that you're spending time with us and listening. And we hope we get to meet each and every one of you in person someday or sometime and get to talk about the blessing you've been for us. Until next time, have a great one.